Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for attending Elastio's webinar. Today's topic is understanding Elastio and AWS Backup, GuardDuty on AWS Backup, because we've been having some questions around it, and we're also very excited to present kind of how our technology complements the security that AWS offers natively. And so I'm joined today by Ishra Nalamaru, who runs our customer success program, and also Anshuman. Anshuman is representing our engineering team, and towards the end of this session, Anshuman is also going to show exciting new integration that we've recently released around GuardDuty. So really thrilled to have them both joining us today. Quick housekeeping note, I guess, before we kick off. So we do have a Q&A feature enabled. So as the presentation's going on, please feel free to drop any questions that you might have in, and we'll make sure that the panelists have an opportunity at the end of the presentation to answer any of your questions. We love hearing your questions, so please feel free to add, and we'll make sure that they are addressed. So on that note, Ishwa, I will let you get started.
Okay, thanks, Cecily. Hi, everyone. The way this webinar will proceed is essentially we have a few slides where I'll discuss about the recent trends in like ransomware, on how the attacks really unfold, and how Elastio actually suits that specific need or addresses that gap in detecting the ransomware encryption. And we also have a cool demo, which Anshuman will be showcasing in the end. So we'll showcase how an attack has taken place and what did GuardDuty detect and what did Elastio detect and what's the difference and what's the value add on top of GuardDuty's detection. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to start with a quote from Gartner. So this is a recent quote from Gartner. Essentially, modern ransomware tactics bypass traditional malware scanners, meaning backups may appear clean, but they're unusable when restored. So the essence of this one is you need to equip your recovery environment with advanced capabilities to analyze backup data using data integrity validation tools like Elastio. This is a quote from Gartner. You can also download it from the Gartner website and then read it. I want to start with essentially talking about the modern ransomwares, how they really bypass the traditional tools. I also have a case study where I want to walk you through how Elastio has helped the customer in recovering from a ransomware attack and how it has bypassed the malware scanners. So if you just think about the modern ransomware attacks today, in most of the attacks takes place by identity theft, whether it could be like, let's say, it's a stolen credentials, or they're using phishing or some malicious way they get into your systems. And once they get into your systems, the majority of the attacks which are successful are either a fileless attack or a polymorphic attack. What does it mean? A fileless attack is essentially an attack where there is no file to scan on sitting on your desk. So either the malware self deletes itself once it's on the disk, or they directly operate from memory so that there is no trace which is left on your disk to scan. And polymorphic is essentially each and every time a malware is generated, it's different. So it is unique. And malware scanners, by the way they work, are essentially signature-based scanners. If there is no signature, which I've seen in the past, then I cannot detect it. That is how they evade the malware scanners. And especially when it comes to zero-day ransomware, so which zero-day is essentially a new ransomware which we haven't seen yet. So these signatures are really like unknown until like the attack is like widespread across your environment. So with this in mind, I want to get into a case study where Elastio was involved or almost like 5 to 6 months ago right now. So in this particular scenario, Elastio, like this was not a customer of Elastio, but we were brought in after the fact once the customer was struggling to recover from their like from an ransomware attack. So they were using major CNAP and EDR tools, so very good names in the market. And 31 days prior to the attack itself, or the D-Day, they breached the firewalls and they used some leak credentials which they already had access to. So once they had that one, they were able to bypass the EDR. And it is fairly common in the ransomware attacks today to either bypass an EDR or unhook them. And once they gain the access, they laterally spread across the environment. And once they know the environment fairly well and detected what are the key things which I need to encrypt the critical data. So they placed the malware self-deleted itself. So when if you scan it with any malware scanner, for example, GuardDuty uses only malware scanner, it cannot detect it because there's no trace of malware at all. And then they started encrypting the files like on their EC2 and DBS data. So while they're doing this encryption, they also left a decryption key in memory so that whenever you pull a file, so you get a decrypted data. So even the data is encrypted, you're still able to access or function, your apps are functional. So while this is happening over a period of next 11 days, they'll be encrypting your data slowly. And once they realize they've like encrypted sufficient amount of data, then they went back and then they essentially wiped out the encryption key itself, decryption key. So once that is done, all your data is corrupted, your backups are gone, and now you're like forced to essentially negotiate a ransom because you're not functional anymore. So over the next 6 days, they've been like constantly trying and then restore their data. And what they realized is that the process is not easy. They have hundreds of servers and it is hunting and pecking the data. Like they're trying, okay, this might be the right backup, but then they realize, okay, it's already been corrupted. So that is where Elastio was pulled in by AWS's incident response team. And when we were pulled in, we were able to deploy within a couple of hours. Once we deployed, we identify the last clean recovery point, which is almost 11 days old, and we pinpointed out like, okay, these are the encrypted files, but also for the forensics, we were able to pull out like this is the variant of the ransomware, and specific indicators of compromise associated with it. And then, so the conclusion of the slide is people had all the very best names in the industry, the CNAP, EDR, but even if you have a malware scanner like GuardDuty, they're still bypassing it. That is where Elastio tools like Elastio comes into play, where we are specifically designed for ransomware encryption and we can detect them. So now I want to tell a different situation where, like, had Elastio been there with a customer, how the situation would have unfolded. So the same attack, so there's a fileless attack, so there's no malware to detect, or like all the other security layers have failed. This is where, like, once the encryption has occurred, Elastio could have immediately picked it up. One, because it is not an endpoint-based solution like EDRs. The second is like it's not just malware scanner. Elastio is designed for essentially detecting ransomware encryption. That is where we could have picked it up on day one when we saw the first backup hit after the encryption. And while this is happening, we could have reduced the downtime. So instead of like you're talking about RPOs and RTOs in a cyber scenario is different. This is where Elastio tries to map like your DR RPOs and RPOs to a cyber RPO and RTO window. We could have easily avoided that situation for the customer. Now, because this gives an example of like how a real life ransomware attack has unfolded and how there was when we found out there was no malware on the disk at all. It's just the ransomware encrypted files. Having that in mind, I want to touch upon quickly the differences between like GuardDuty's malware scanning versus Elastio here. So the first line is malware scanning. So GuardDuty also has a malware scanning and Elastio also has a malware scanning. But having said that, just is a malware scan really enough in case of modern ransomware? No. All the top 10 ransomware gangs today, they either use a fileless attack where the file immediately deletes itself. Second, it's a polymorphic attack where the malware scanners do not work. So that is where like the ransomware encryption detection works. So Elastio has it, and GuardDuty does not cannot detect the ransomware encryption piece. And we'll also demonstrate this in a cool demo which Anshuman has today. We'll walk you through a situation where like how different the findings between Elastio and GuardDuty are. So the other cool thing which we also have is an insider threat protection or encryption detection. So you might have heard about like North Korean gangs infiltrating into like North American organizations where the employee itself is working from North Korea, where they don't have to perform a ransomware encryption. They can simply come and encrypt your data because they have access to the internal system, or like make them a password protected folder. So we also have the capability to essentially detect those spikes in encryption if there is something odd within your environment. And one other thing which I often hear from customers is essentially our instant response service. So like whenever you get an alert, there's also a second pair of like human eyes taking a look at like your alert itself, and they triage and then tell you whether it's a false positive, true positive. It's a true positive, what should you do? So they give you all those details and expertise when you get an alert. So that is not available with GuardDuty. If GuardDuty triggers something, it's a false positive. It is on you to analyze the file, essentially to go into the system, pick it up, analyze it, and then determining whether it's a false positive or true positive. But with Elastio, you have a team which essentially guides you and then resolves false positives or true positives, depending on the situation. And now, when it comes to the coverage itself, GuardDuty is limited to AWS Backup. But on the other hand, like Elastio, we covered a wide variety of like backup vendors out there. AWS Backup, Rubrik, Commvault, Cohesity, NetBackup, Veeam, Azure Backup, and GCP is coming up. So we have a bunch of backup services which we cover today. And even within the AWS environment itself today, GuardDuty's like scans are limited to S3, EC2, and EBS when it comes to AWS Backup. But on the other hand, last year we support a wide variety of services: S3, EC2, EBS, EFS, FSx ONTAP, and we also can scan via AWS Backup restore testing, which GuardDuty cannot do. We also integrate with Elastic Disaster Recovery Service, where like you have critical loads, we can also scan those, or even the marketplace AMIs. So one other thing which is unique about Elastio is also we also integrate on the storage side. For example, we can perform a live scanning on like S3, FSx ONTAP. We can also scan FSx ONTAP snapshots on the other hand, providing you a comprehensive breadth across all the services. And when it comes to multi-cloud, so we support like AWS, Azure, IBM, GCP is coming up, and we also support all the on-prem workloads. So that's at a high level. If you want one slide talking about the differences between Elastio and GuardDuty, this is the one which you have, or which you can use internally if you want. So now that we understood like technically what's the differences, but we also want to demonstrate the same thing with a cool demo which Anshuman will bring up right now.
Yeah, thanks, Ishwar. And before I start the demo, let me just set a bit of context. The team's been working hard to get this GuardDuty integration, and right now the GuardDuty integration, the demo I'm going to show you, because of the time constraints, I've already set up an EC2 instance. So let me just give you some context while I pull up the page. So right now I have a EC2 instance already deployed, which is I've planted a malware which has been detonated, and then GuardDuty has ran. It's picked up the malware, but this malware actually is more of a polymorphic attack, as Ishwar was mentioning. So this attack actually triggers, like, it has a lot of ransomware in it, and as Ishwar explained, the GuardDuty only discovered the malware, but then, of course, the trigger went to Elastio. Elastio did a full scan and figured out that there were some ransomware attacks as well. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate. The only setting context here is that this scan has already happened, and the only reason for that was the time constraint, because it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to scan an EC2 instance with all its associated volumes.
I also want to give a brief overview of the present, like we are almost GAing this feature. So what this feature will do is whenever a GuardDuty finding is triggered, Elastio can automatically perform or trigger a scan and perform a more comprehensive scan on top of the GuardDuty finding itself.
That's right.
So in this particular context, what Anshuman will show is essentially what's the finding in GuardDuty, and then we can also go on and see the finding in Elastio as well. So
Right.
Anshuman, can you just walk us through how the finding looks like in GuardDuty?
Right. So this is GuardDuty. This is the customer's account. Of course, this is a testing account for us, but this is how a customer account's going to look. We will enable GuardDuty on one of the Cloud Connector accounts that talks to Elastio. And from there on, we're basically going to look at, these are a bunch of malware scans that were done. So we're going to look at the most recent one. And I'll prove to you this is the exact scan that was done by GuardDuty, and that's the same scan that we performed. So if you drill into this scan that happened, it happened about 17 hours ago, you'll see that the scan was completed. This is the EC2 instance in question, and this is the attached EBS value with their IDs and ARNs. And as you can see, there was one threat detected. Of course, this is an orchestrated threat that I planted the malware. And if you go to the threats detected, you'll see that GuardDuty indeed calls out the malware specifics here. And if I were to drill into the infected files, I'll see this is the file path. And I'm showing you this because you'll see again in the Elastio side, this is going to be looking pretty much the same. But yeah, Ishwar, this is the GuardDuty and how it looks in customer side.
One thing to note here is also note the number of findings which GuardDuty has flagged here. So it's just a single file which you can see in the system. Will now, because this alert has been triggered in GuardDuty, Elastio automatically will go and trigger a scan. So let's go ahead and then show that one, Anshuman.
Okay. So I'm just going to switch over to the Elastio side. So this is the customer view on what they see in Elastio. So I will go to the monitor section first. And you'll see there are a lot of scans. Of course, a lot of scans are happening. So we've added this easy triggered by, filter. And we'll choose GuardDuty. And the last one is the one, it's pretty much the same time if you compare the times. But essentially, this is the EC2 scan that happened. We put a badge of GuardDuty there, but I'll explain how we can compare. So first of all, you can see the asset ID ending in 9E06 is the same one as what we described over here. So it's the exact same asset that was scanned. And if I drill into this asset, so you see the scans that were performed were ransomware, encryption, and malware scans. If I drill into this asset, you'll see the key scan here shows the last known infected scan happened 16 hours ago. And this is where the difference is. So you'll see the malware was detected the same way, but ransomware was also detected here. So if I drill into the infections that were found, this is what Ishwar was trying to mention, is we find a lot more findings of infection. So if I actually filter the threats here and just go to malware, indeed you'll see the same file path and the same malware infection that occurred. And this is similar to what GuardDuty found. You can even see the threat type, and if you compare it with what we see here, you'll see it's the exact threat type, and that's fine. But then if we were to expand our findings to look at ransomware, you'll see all these extra ransomware findings appear here.
Yeah. So this is great to see, Anshuman. So one thing which we really need to note here is for the demo purpose, we wanted to show like both GuardDuty and Elastio can detect malware. But in majority of ransomware attacks, in reality, the malware would have been gone by now, and you would not have found malware at all. So what would have been left out is the ransomware encrypted files, which Elastio would have detected and GuardDuty would have missed. That is where we really want to focus on like essentially for modern ransomware. It's not a malware which is really important. It's knowing you're safe from ransomware encryption and your backups are clean from ransomware encryption, not just malware. That is where the value add and the primary differentiation of Elastio, and it's also necessary in today's world, which is, again, that's why Gartner quoted Elastio, as well as recognizes as an industry, we are moving towards like ransomware encryption detection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the demo.
Good. Thank you so much, both of you. It's interesting, Isha. It's almost like you could see the Q&A. So we have a mix of, I guess, sort of folks who know Elastio very well and folks who are maybe still exploring it. So there's a range of questions. But one is specific to the integration. One person was just asking if you could speak to how it's been, you recommend customers implement it, and how, whether you've seen it help a customer already. Understanding, of course, that it's just an early preview.
Yeah, so we this early preview, we took like feedback from a couple of customers, essentially talking about like, okay, how did they plan on using this one? So they're pretty much good with like having Elastio both for ransomware and malware scanning. They don't want to enable like malware scanning for GuardDuty. But what they're really interested in, like let's say if GuardDuty triggered some API based or like let's say user access based triggers. So then Elastio can go and then actually perform a full deep dive into it on like, okay, is this really good? Like, were there any malicious threat actors trying to encrypt the files? So those are the things which Elastio can go and then actually analyze the data. So you can think of that as Elastio is analyzing the data, and the GuardDuty is essentially looking for the logs or anything based on access-based like controls or triggers. So that is the way our customers really are trying to like bridge both like integrate GuardDuty and Elastio.
Good. Thank you, Isha. And I feel like also one of the points that came through in the demo, thank you, Anshuman, but is the level of detail that you get from the Elastio trigger. And I understand that that's often helpful for the incident response team too, not just for the recovery component, but also remediation. The value of understanding, you know, what the attacker was, which files explicitly were impacted. So I do know that that's also a big piece of
That's
how.
so that you bring up one important point, Cecily, which I want to add one of the detail to. So in the demo that Anshuman has shown, what is also important is we can really recognize what variant of ransomware it is, and because malwares are like thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands right now. But if you just think about the ransomware gangs, those are limited to thousands, at least at this point in time. And because we have reverse engineered almost all the ransomware, we can also tell which variant of ransomware it is, which gang has attacked it, which also gives a lot of details during the process of like forensics. Because typically these people use some sort of vulnerability to get into your system, or you know the specific indicators of compromise, which can like fasten the process of your forensics.
Excellent. So one question that we got is somebody recommending, you know, how often should you have Elastio scanning the data? And wondering with some of the, I mean, with the attack tactics, whether you would want to schedule maybe more frequently than your backup schedule.
Yeah. So, sorry. So that's a good question. So we do see a range of customers like protecting in different ways. So even within a customer, like we'll have different workloads. Like let's say some are critical workloads and some are like not that critical, I would say, maybe priority wise. So for example, we have a customer where they perform an hourly scan, which is essentially like Elastio takes a snapshot, scans it, making sure that everything is clean. At the same time, they also perform a backup every 24 hours, which Elastio goes and scans. So you really can have that flexibility of essentially scanning, even if your backup frequency is, let's say, 1 day, you can go with Elastio on a much more granular level and scan at a much higher frequency. And also one other point to note there is Elastio scans are also incremental in nature, because even if you're scanning at a more frequent basis, it is not, you're not incurring huge costs because essentially the scans are incremental there.
And just to add one more point there, is the schedules between the Elastio scan and, of course, GuardDuty also is doing its scans, right? So essentially, when GuardDuty finds something, it sends us a notification. So even though, let's say, the Elastio scan is happening every day, if GuardDuty finds something suspicious, maybe an hour after the last scan happened, we're going to trigger a new scan, which is what happened in this example, and get more data. And if there's actually something suspicious that happened after the last scan, we're going to catch it sooner.
That's a great call out. Thank you, Anshuman. All right, good. So I'm conscious that we reached the end of the time, but we will. I probably put it into the chat, but people's contact information, if you do have any more questions that you weren't able to address, we're always happy to answer them. And thank you, Ishra. Thank you, Anshuman, so much for taking the time. And we hope that this will be a conversation that continues.
Thank you.
Thank you.